Mr. President, I appreciate the Senator from West Virginia's objection to this, and I appreciate his comments about the importance of long-term care. I agree. It's something that we need to address in this country. There are other ideas out there, and I think better ideas that are based upon incentives as opposed to creating a new government program. But let me just get, if I might, briefly here for a moment at what I believe is the real issue, and that is this was a program that was destined to fail. It was pretty clear from the beginning. Many of us said that. There were 12 of my colleagues on the other side, 12 Democrats, who voted to strike this particular provision from the health care bill back in December of 2009. And I think at that time, many of us were making the same arguments that the experts are now conceding at the Department of Health and Human Services. And in fact, there were colleagues on the other side. One of my Democrat colleagues called this a Ponzi scheme of the highest order, something that Bernie Madoff would be proud of. That's how it was being described before it was voted and put into the health care bill to help demonstrate that the health care bill would actually reduce the deficit. But the fact of the matter now is, after having had several months to look at this, here we are 19 months or so later, the Department of Health and Human Services has concluded that this doesn't work. They can't make it work. And now the CBO has come out and said, okay, it really doesn't impact the budget. So my view is we ought to repeal this. We ought to get it off the books. We ought to address this issue, but address it in a way that makes sense for the American people, not in a way that adds trillions of dollars of additional debt. And if you look at what we have today in terms of unfunded liabilities, we have $61.6 trillion in unfunded liabilities in this country, or $528,000 for every family. Now, that's 5 times what most families have in terms of home mortgages, car mortgages, other types of debt. That's what we are piling on the American people today. This would have been yet another unfunded liability. And the experts warned at the time. We now have all the, we did an investigation of this. It was published in September. I worked with some of my House colleagues on it. It was the CLASS Act, the untold story. And what it concluded was that the actuaries at HHS were saying before this bill was even passed that, one, it would be a recipe for disaster, would lead to an insurance death spiral, and the chief Medicare actuary at HHS said at the time, 36 years of actuarial experience lead me to believe that this program would collapse in short order and require significant federal subsidies to continue. That's what the experts were saying about this program way back before it was even voted on in 2009. So I think we ought to acknowledge what now everybody concludes to be the case, and that is that this program won't work. It is actuarially unsound, and we ought to repeal it. We ought to get it off the books, and that was simply what my motion would do. I regret that the other side has objected to it, but I have some of my colleagues here today who were very active on this issue, have been active on this issue, and I would say to my colleague from Arizona that in light of this report that came out from the HHS last month outlining exactly why they can't move forward with CLASS, it seems difficult to understand why the administration doesn't support repeal of this program.